Sergeant Bloomstrom, Tessa. I'm with 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. I'm a motor transport Marine with H&S Company. We went to a bunch of ports. We trained in Saudi Arabia. If you want to know what ports, we went to England, Bahrain, Greece. I'm forgetting the other ones. In England, it was good. We weren't allowed to really leave port because we were there during COVID, so we were really consolidated to just where the port was, but they had some vendors out there. Those were pretty cool. We got to learn about one of the guys out there. He had this little coffee stand, and basically he said he would have had to completely get rid of it if we weren't to have come to port to financially support his business, so that was pretty cool. We were out there kind of just doing any type of training we could get our hands on. We were waiting for any calls for anything to happen, stayed ready, I guess. And when I say training, we did training both off ship and on ship. We had snipers. They would blow up or have this box and blow up, we'll say balloons, and tape them to boxes and practice shooting those from the flight deck. We had little kind of like table 1 or 2 shoots on the flight deck, CLS training, TCCC. I mean, we had all kinds of training, anything. I found out I was going to Afghanistan officially for the first time when I was standing in line at the DFAC. I was waiting, and then they had the news on, and the news headline that popped up, it said Pentagon 3,000 troops are being sent to Afghanistan. And then when I saw that, I was like, well, that's us. We got the call when it's going. So, yeah. I don't really know what I was feeling at the time. I mean, I was anywhere between excited to participate in something real and I'm not going to go home. Like, I was in between that. So we did not have a FET established at all prior to going to Kuwait to actually attempt some training for Afghanistan. But on the 24th VO on ship and everything, I was strictly motor T. So we were in Kuwait for approximately, it was 30 days. I would say we didn't start any type of non-combatant training until maybe a week or 2 after we were already in Kuwait. And I don't really recall a whole lot of days where we trained. I mean, it was long hours for a couple of days, but not a lot. So as we were coming into land on the airstrip in Afghanistan, they didn't have specifically what it was going to look like. They just were like, all right, when we get off this C-17, we're going to all go condition 1. We're going to be ready for anything, and we're going to be moving. Like, we need to be not taking our time. And when I stepped off, it was a lot calmer than I expected because they cleared the flight line already. We didn't know it was completely... I mean, we knew it was enough to land, but we didn't know it was going to be that clear, I guess. I remember walking up to the back of the terminal. They had this big "Welcome to Kabul" sign, and then we're just kind of waiting right there to get attached to where we're going. They told us to set some gear down in this little, it was like a little hutch thing, like she had mentioned, but it was like an abandoned little makeshift PX thing of some sort, that was abandoned. And anyways, we set our gear down in there, and then we got sent straight to Northgate. So being motor T my whole career, and then transitioning to have to all of a sudden be a FET team or part of one, it was exciting and new. I was excited to learn it. Nervous because, I mean, I wasn't always trained to be boots on the ground. I was a little combat trucker on wheels, so it was different. Some of the training that I needed to be in a FET team and stuff I used for motor T and convoy operations, it kind of went hand in hand. It was pretty similar in ways as far as needing to know where you need to have security, things to watch out for, threats. It was kind of all similar things that you need to know. The crowd at Northgate was chaotic. I mean, they were climbing up the fence. They were throwing their own bodies over sea wire. I mean, they were so desperate to get out. They wanted to leave. They needed that, or they didn't know what was next. They didn't know if they didn't leave with us, what was going to happen to them. So, I mean, and that was, I mean, the environment with every gate, pretty much. I mean, it was all just absolute chaos. They wanted to be the next one to be inside so they could get out. Some of the threats that we faced at each of the gates were, of course, IEDs or suicide bombers. We were getting small arms fire at all of our gates. Where it was coming from, I have no idea. I mean, there was firefights all the time. Sometimes you couldn't even tell who they were between. I can't even say if it was necessarily from us to somebody outside. I don't know if it was two outside people coming at each other. I'm not sure. But there was firefights all the time. So some of them, or most of them, were probably warning shots. But there was so many that it was hard to tell what it was exactly from being on the inside if you couldn't necessarily see. And you're hearing these from all over around the airport. I mean, you don't know where exactly it's even coming from. So, I mean, it's hard to say whether they were warning shots or if they were firefights. I was at North Gate, East Gate, and I was also at Abbey Gate on the 26th. So some additional tasks I had were escorting women and children who didn't have proper documentations back outside of the gate. I got transferred to Abbey Gate August 26, 2021. I started off a shift in the morning. So after the bombing went off, we quickly threw our gear back on because we had just set it down. I'm personally trying to find a way if I can get back out there because I want to help. I want to be there. I want to help. The answer was no. They had us post kind of like a security around our little quarters, and I wasn't a part of that security, but they had Marines doing that. And then they just kind of had us geared up, ready for something if something were to come next. And then I have no idea how long we waited there, but I do know eventually we finally got word on who had passed and how many. They started listing off the females that were working with us that had passed, Sergeant G, and they mentioned that Lane Hart was injured. And we all kind of it was a punch in the gut when we heard that. I didn't know G super well. I was similar to Gold. I mostly knew her in passing and was getting to know her through working with her. But I mean, no matter how much you know the person, it hurts just as much. Her death specifically impacted me a lot, just because she was somebody who I looked up to, even not knowing her. Just as a Marine in general, she was great. I mean, she was who, as another female Marine, you would want to reach out to be. You would want to reach her level, and just seeing everything that she was doing and her putting her whole heart into this whole operation and having such a positive attitude all the time. She was just somebody that I really looked up to and I want to be like. I still do. So one of the other female Marines that I was working with that I looked up to as a role model or a mentor, the reason I looked up to her was her and I got super close on ship. I mean, we lived right next to each other. We talked to each other day in, day out. She was kind of my rock all throughout deployment. I knew I could go to her for anything, and she knew that she could come to me too. So being out there in Afghanistan with her, working shoulder to shoulder, it was just kind of a whole different level of sisterhood, I guess, that I feel and have created with her, that, I mean, no one could break it, or nothing could change it. One of the greatest forms of leadership I saw was actually from the children that were there. I mean, you'd see this 12-year-old little girl as like holding hands in a chain with her mom, all of her other siblings, guiding her way through the crowds, guiding their way into the search tent, guiding them to the comfort area. I mean, and they were holding it down. Like, they would be coming up to us asking for food, water, diapers, formula, anything that they would need. That those kids were the ones that were just extremely brave and led their whole family through this chaos. And it was just amazing to see that such a small child could accomplish something so big. Sailor, actually, who displayed some great leadership out there. When I was in the little hutch or whatever where we were sleeping at, and we had gotten the news about who had passed and how many and all of that, the chaplain from CLB-24, he had actually kind of got us to go do this little school circle around him and stuff, and we all kind of just did this mass group hug thing, and he just started singing at the top of his lungs, and it was we all just kind of listened to him sing and just all cried it out in this big group huddle of, I'd say, close to almost 100 Marines or so. Just we weren't saying anything. We were all just listening, and I don't know, that was something that I'll never forget. Right as we were about to retrograde out of Afghanistan, some things that stood out to me was all of our allies that had flags put up, they would slowly lower theirs down as they would leave throughout August, and our flag was the last one standing. And it was just a weird feeling, I guess, just to see that flag come down. It was also a weird feeling from how chaotic the airport was, and then when we were about to leave, it was just dead. Like, it was quiet. It was weird. It was hard to process, I guess. It didn't instantly get quiet right on the 26th or even the day after. We still had to go do what we had to do. Like, we still had to process refugees. We still had to finish our job. We still needed to hold ourselves professionally. I mean, we couldn't let it sit there. We couldn't just sit there and just stop. I mean, we had to keep going. So when we came back to Kuwait from Afghanistan, they kept wanting to do like stress classes. They kept wanting to keep us involved in talking and whatnot. I hated it. I did not want to talk. I didn't want to see anyone. And it wasn't because I was all down and depressed. It was just because I'd been in so much chaos for that amount of time, to where I'm just like, I need to just be alone. I don't want to talk. I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to, just leave me alone. But I also struggled with how quiet it was when I would try to go to sleep at night. I was just like, it's too quiet. Like, this is weird. So I'd spend a lot of nights just kind of staring at the stars in Kuwait. One of my favorite memories of there. So in Afghanistan, going to sleep, I mean, you'd be hearing gunshots, you would hear screaming, you would hear yelling. I mean, trucks moving around, the C-17s flying and landing, just flashbangs. I mean, you would hear all of that as you're trying to go to sleep. And it got to a point where you were just so freaking tired, you would find some time to fall asleep. But going back to Kuwait when we could have an actual decent amount of sleep, It was just we are not being so exhausted and crashing to all the noise to a normal sleep, if that makes any sense. I did work with a female from our allies. She was an Australian in the Australian Army. She helped me escort a female off or out of one of the gates. And then they also, her and some of her fellow soldiers, we were kind of like trading MREs with each other and trying each other's out to see what it was like. How I adapted to the situation in Afghanistan was honestly just, I shut my brain off for the most part. I couldn't really let myself feel much because, then my morals were going to get in the way, my values were going to get in the way, and then, that could that could flaunt the mission in a way. As far as food and eating, I ate when I could. My priority was not eating, to be honest. I really didn't care if I ate or not. It was something that boosted my morale while in Afghanistan. There was an interpreter that needed help finding this little girl's parents, and the little girl ended up lost somewhere too. Long story short, I ended up finding this little girl and found the interpreter, and then we had brought the little girl to her family. And in return, the interpreter gave us 2 cases of these mini Rippets. And those Rippets were the best. That changed in the moment. We needed a boost. We needed that, and that put a smile on all of our faces in that tent. So it was really, those were nice. When I landed back in the States, I felt relieved to make it home. I was really excited to be able to see my family. I wasn't really keeping much contact with them. I was very bare minimum for the last month or so on deployment. So I knew that when I landed, I was safe. I was finally able to go see my family, and some of them monthly at the minimum. They have mostly all gone away to other units or gotten out of the Marine Corps or whatever. So it's more difficult to keep in contact with them sometimes because they're moving on and doing their own thing. I really wish I could still be close with all of them as much as I was to the end of deployment, but they're always going to be my best friends. The guys that were out there, they were doing, they were the ones driving the FET teams to and from the gates. They were also transporting refugees from the gates to the terminal. And that's mainly what their job was while they were there. They also would be escorting people on and off of the airport. And then we had a couple that we had some mechanics out there too. They would use their mechanical skills to, like a bus, for example, if it needed something, they would try to find a way to get that up and working again. Yeah. So other vehicles other than tactical ones we used, just regular pickup trucks. We had one of those like minivans, some buses. As far as weird or different type of transportation, we had our chaps from 1-8. He was driving a bus. That's not supposed to happen, but yeah. Don't let their families think that you forgot about them, but also don't overwhelm them. Things will feel somewhat better with time, but it's always going to hurt the same no matter how many years pass. Maybe even setting out a table on the 26th of August with all of their names, people saying their names, just keeping their memory alive. my morals were incredibly challenged during this operation. So my biggest takeaway for myself is, I mean, I'll never forget who I am. And even sometimes you have to completely go against your morals to accomplish a mission. And that is a really hard thing to accept and a huge learning thing for me, I guess. Because as much as I didn't want to go against my morals, I had to. And